Hey everybody, it's Matt Erpelding, Vice President of Government and Community Relations from the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce. The Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce is the only 5-star accredited member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Idaho, and it's something that we're very proud of. Part of that accreditation is our ability to provide high quality content to our members. And as you know, through the COVID epidemic, we've been doing that virtually. Today, we have a really exciting conversation, particularly because of some of the weird events that have occurred in our economy and the importance of real estate in the Boise Treasure Valley. So today we're going to talk a lot about real estate, both residential and commercial, as it relates to the Treasure Valley in a COVID economy. But before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce is a nonprofit that is dedicated to serving our members. And through that, we are also highly dependent upon the investment and the care of our members to make sure that we're able to deliver content. Today, we have 4 amazing sponsors who have been very helpful and have helped us put together this event. Stark Accelerators, Alliance Title, Hendricks Development, and Executive Professional Management. Executive Management Services, I apologize. We also have 4 panelists today to talk about commercial and residential real estate. First is April Florczyk. April is with 208 Real Estate and has been working in the Boise real estate industry for 19 years. April's gained respect from countless professionals in the industry. Her attention to detail, superior people skills, broad knowledge of the real estate industry as a whole, and her pure determination to indulge her clients with first-class service sets her apart. April, we are so excited to have you today. We'll be join the entire group in just a minute. But next I have Scott Feighner. Scott's with Colliers a partner at Colliers International. He's been a leading expert in office and sales for Colliers International since 2008. He's been a regular in Colliers' top 5 salesperson of the year for the last 8 years. And he came into commercial real estate in 2008, which, as you may recall, was not a time when anybody wanted to go into the real estate market. Despite poor timing of his entrance, Scott was able to build a strong portfolio of office listings, including the Wells Fargo Center, 8th and Main, One Capital Center, the Owyhee Building, Carnegie Library, and the Athlos Building, just to name a few. Some may call him a deal junkie as he transacts between 50 to 60 leases and purchases a year. And despite COVID shutdowns for much of March through May, Scott is on track to do the same volume of transactions in 2020. Scott, we're really excited to have you. I mean, your expertise is going to be huge to this conversation. Next, we have Clark Krause. Clark is the Executive Director of the Boise Valley Economic Partnership. Clark came to BVAP with a strong history and experience in economic development, spending 7 years as president and CEO of the New Mexico Partnership. During his tenure at the New Mexico Partnership, Clark and his team were tasked with out-of-state recruitment, and bringing economic-based jobs to New Mexico. Under his leadership, that partnership attracted 45 companies and created 14,000 jobs in the state. Prior to that, Clark was the Director of Economic Development for Cedar City, in Utah, where he recruited 9 companies and $185 million worth of industrial development. He spent years in the ski industry and also in the automobile industry. He's also been responsible for bringing countless number of jobs to the Treasure Valley, and we're very lucky to have him, particularly as our economy shifts during this interesting pandemic. And last but not least, we have Demetre Booker. Demetre is the founder and co-owner of Elevate Commercial. He specializes in investments that enhance communities and recently purchased the bridal shop property on Ustick. It will be called the Ustick Town Center, and Demetre specializes in providing customized solutions for his clients and facilitating unique investments for their specific needs in multiple markets, including Idaho. He attended California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, majoring in agricultural business, and he's an active community leader who seeks to create social impact within a multitude of communities. He currently is involved in numerous nonprofit organizations that offer mentorship, outreach, and scholarship to young athletes. Wow, this is a big group, and this is a big conversation that we have today. But before we get started, just a quick check-in. How has COVID personally changed both your personal and your professional lives? April, let's start with you.
Oh my gosh, where do I begin? I've got 3 children that are now homeschooling, 2 in junior high and 1 in high school. So trying to keep tabs on them. My real estate team, we're all working remotely from home, trying to connect once a week just to kind of keep that group culture going. But I've definitely become a little more tech savvy, having to do online meetings. So still very busy though.
Great. Scott.
Yeah. So I recently had a newborn. She's 6 months old, and I have a 2.5-year-old, and have been working with from home, and have really appreciated my nanny. From March until my baby was born until April, most of the economy was shut down, and so it was actually a really nice time for me to be with my family. So trying to stay positive, and things are still happening in Boise, which I'll talk about shortly.
Great. Demetre.
Yes, it's been very interesting. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and so we're preparing for homeschooling, like April and Scott is. And as far as business, it's just been really getting our team to focus in on helping our tenants or residents, and really spending time with family, but also focusing on helping and being there for our tenants and residents, because they need help right now. This is a tough time for everyone.
Absolutely. And last but not least, Clark. You're muted, Clark.
I have an 18 and 21-year-old at home that both have decided to take a semester off from the university. But for our family, it's probably the right choice. But we've put them both to work, so they're getting some work experience interim. So that's great. And then I don't know what I would do without living in Boise. Our access to recreation. I mountain bike every day. I don't know what I would have done without mountain biking. And I was lucky enough 2 months before the pandemic hit that I adopted a 9-year-old Dachshund mini poodle. So he just has kept our house together. I've talk about value of dogs this time period. My dog is everything. So
that's great. Well, we're lucky to have you all. And I'm going to start with you, Scott. In February, Boise was on the hot list of almost every top 5 list in the country, and commercial real estate was also on the up and up. But since then, in particular, COVID-19 has forced a lot of changes. My question to you is, what have been the most recent trends you're seeing, and what has changed since February?
Yeah, so I'd like to speak to that in 2 phases, one from the leasing standpoint and one from sales. Because I do both, and we'll talk about the COVID shutdown period and then post. So as I alluded to earlier, my baby was a COVID baby born March 12th, the same day as the NBA shut down. From March 12th to about mid-May, I did not show office space one time. There were very little inquiries, and the leasing world did shut down, and that's across the board, all across the valley. On the sales front, during the COVID period, during that shutdown, a lot of the 1031 money that I was helping place, that got pushed back due to some regulations that allowed from the government that allowed people to push back timing for closings. What did keep me going and kept my family fed, I would say, is that the owner-user segment, those that could operate in this economy, that knew that their businesses were, COVID safe, those in e-commerce or those that, needed to have an office presence, kept moving forward. So we did close many transactions for owners that needed their own office space.
That's great. And so you saw the shutdown made it so you weren't showing anything, but you've still been able to continue to move forward with closings and getting people into their spaces.
Yeah. And since then, yeah, since the shutdown, I'd say June 1st and on, there has, I do go out and show office space about as much as I used to now, which has been great. A lot of tenants that are moving around are the tech related that have e-commerce. Law firms are still active. The United States government has some, some things out there that they're working on. So I'd say, the reopening has been good. But looking at, maybe some other markets, like Salt Lake, they're starting to see, some pullbacks and shrinkage of office tenants. So far, we haven't seen that yet, but I expect that to be might be coming.
April, you're in the real estate market, and it's a very similar question. I mean, everything I hear is that inventory's low and that prices for the residential environment continue to go up. But what changes have you seen since February, and how has it impacted our local residential real estate market?
So we actually, when we entered the pandemic, we were already in a status of really low inventory. Our market's been pretty hot and active for the last, I would say, 4 consistent years. So just to give you an idea, in February, the active listings in the Ada County area, there was just over 300 homes on the market. Now, if you backtrack 12 months ago, we had over 900 homes on the market. So we had a 60% reduction in listings entering into COVID. We had about a 45-day period, I would say, where our phones slowed down and weren't quite ringing as often as they were. I think everybody just took a break on wondering what was going to unfold from this pandemic. Our team stayed pretty active and busy. I think when the pandemic hit, we had about almost 50 transactions pending. And remarkably, we only had one or two that terminated, that the buyers decided to pull out. Since then, though, that 45-day period of the slowdown, our market has just continued to take off. If anything, people now are realizing living at home and how important it is to have the space, especially with your kids schooling from home and trying to work from home. So we have a lot of clients looking to buy bigger homes, as well as just people from out of state who love the quality of life that we have here. That's been amplified even more so because we've been a little more on the forefront of being more open with some of our restaurants and just all the recreational activities that we have access to. So I would absolutely say amplified buyers moving in and really low inventory. It's almost created a perfect storm here in the Valley.
Well, I'm a bit like Scott. I have a 2-year-old who's almost 3 who was home with my wife and I in a 900 square foot house. And we learned very quickly that it was too small for 3 people who are all trying to work. And our 2-year-old is naturally the most inquisitive kid ever. And so it just made life very challenging. Demetre, we're excited to have you in the Boise market. It's exciting when new companies are coming into the market, and you're in a host of different states doing real estate work. And my question for you is, what makes you decide to enter into a market? Why did you decide to enter into Idaho's market? And what are some of the trends you're seeing in other states as it relates to Idaho?
Yeah, great question. Number one, the reason why I started looking into the Idaho, particularly Boise market, is back in 2001, I took a recruiting trip to BSU for football. And so I enjoyed my time in Boise. And so fast forward to 2018, I was looking at areas to buy property, and I found a mobile home park in Nampa that I ended up buying back in February 2018. During that time frame, just going hiking, exploring Boise, spending time, I realized, number one, the quality of life is great. Number two, the price per square foot and the cap rates were a lot different than Southern California or even Northern California, or even most places on the West Coast. We talk about Oregon and Washington. And so and number three was just the distance. It was a short flight from San Diego. And so that made it more reasonable to come and invest time and money into Boise. And then the biggest thing is the people are nice. People are very welcoming and helpful. And so that just created a perfect storm. The areas that I currently invest, are in Southern California, Northern California, Arizona market, New Mexico, Texas, Florida, Georgia, Pittsburgh market. So I'm in multiple states. What makes Boise unique is it's a short distance to the airport. So whenever you travel for business, it's easy to get back and forth to the airport. Number two, great weather, great outdoor activities. And number three is just opportunities. When you look at other markets, they're already oversaturated. As far as, you're seeing things in a 5% or lower cap rates. And in Boise, you can still buy some 6, 7 cap, sometimes 8 cap properties. And so it just makes more sense. And it's very convenient to travel throughout the town.
That's truthfully why I ended up in Boise after leaving Idaho after college. I decided to come back to Boise because it was just so easy to travel and catch a major airport, but still be 4 blocks from the trails. It was just incredible. And I love it here for that reason. Clark, your camera went out, so you got me a little panicked. However, I'm going to ask you the question in case you're still there. Oh, there we are. Clark.
Sorry about that.
No worries. You've been committed to bringing new businesses and expanding the economic value of the Treasure Valley since you got here during the Great Recession. And in our conversations, there have been some shifts in what interest you're seeing coming to the Treasure Valley. Speak a little bit to the shifts in the types of businesses that are looking at the Treasure Valley compared to February when COVID hadn't even started.
Yeah, well, we had a record year last year when it came to bringing new companies into the valley. We had 9 wins, and so when COVID hit, I would have told you that things were going to slow down. That's just the opposite of what's happened. We're about 40% or 140% of last year's projects. But the shift in projects has been interesting. Instead of what we were seeing last year was about 60% of the projects we were seeing were out of San Francisco and Seattle, and they were mostly office, headquarter type jobs. And this year we've had this huge shift over to the other side, which we love. It's more in advanced manufacturing, food and beverage, as well as some logistics. And so there's just been this freeze that's happened on the manufacturing side, on the office side. But manufacturing and food have more than replaced what we're seeing in the marketplace. We're actually busier than last year, which is crazy, but that's where we're at.
Matt, you're on mute.
I've been doing this since April. That was the biggest rookie move I've ever had. What I was saying was, I think it's great that we're seeing the shift for new businesses coming here, and particularly in the advanced manufacturing sector. But Scott, we know that there are a lot of businesses that are struggling just to pay their leases right now. And I know you specialize in medical and office space, but Colliers has such a diverse portfolio of the types of organizations that they're leasing buildings and space to. What is Colliers doing to help some of those companies that are kind of caught in this environment where they're unable to make the bottom line and they're at risk of losing their property because of COVID?
Yeah, thanks for the question. To clarify, Colliers, we don't own any buildings, and there are agents and people within Colliers that do own buildings. But what I'll speak to is on people that are struggling, tenants that are struggling, is that for the most part, everyone, in Idaho and across the nation wants to make this work. So there has been people are pulling together and saying, okay, what can we do to be fair? Whether that's, hey, let's abate some rent, just pay triple nets, things like that. I would say that people have, on both sides, landlords and tenants, have been amenable to work together. And where in the office sector, we haven't seen a lot of rent abatement given or even asked for. And I think that, has a lot to do with, what people are doing in commerce that's still happening in that sector. And so unless it's like a chiropractor or or even a gym or something like that, those people have been hit really hard, or some medical offices have been hit hard. But for the most part, people are working together, and if there's any rent abatement, typically that will get paid back over the next, hey, let's work to put you on a payment plan, or let's add another 3 months to the backside of your term. But most people, for the most part, are trying to work together.
You mentioned that, well, who did I lose here? Oh, here he comes. You mentioned that Salt Lake was starting to see a little bit of pullback, and I just wanted to know if you could expand a little bit upon that. Where are they seeing the pullback? What are they seeing? And do you think that it's like a canary in a coal mine for the Boise market?
Yeah, I hope not. But so the companies that I just referenced here in Boise that have paid their rent and kept their businesses going. Some of your real estate firms, your banks and law firms, CPAs, and your more traditional firms are arguably making rent payments and staying the same size in Boise right now. We have a Colliers Salt Lake office, and in speaking with the Colliers office brokers down there, they're seeing office tenants asking to shrink in size, asking for rent abatement. These tenants that up here in Boise have not asked for that yet. So I'm hoping that we can that there are enough differences between Boise and say Salt Lake that we can continue to work through that and not see that. But there is that happening in some larger markets.
Well, thanks for that clarification. And Demetre, as a person who's kind of entering the market here, I mean, over the next 2 years, I think that the city of Boise is looking at adding around 191,000 square feet of additional commercial space, 11,000 square feet of retail space. That's in addition to what we already have. But the future of commercial real estate right now might be a little bit foggy. So I guess my question for you is, what are you hearing around the nation? And is this COVID kind of an episodic event, or do you see a fairly dramatic shift in how people use commercial property moving forward?
Yeah, great question. What we see, and again, I'm part of a mastermind group. It's over 100 real estate investors nationwide. We meet once a quarter, and so collectively, there's a lot of information moving pretty fast. And so what we've determined and either this business, viable businesses, this decade and reinvest. And we look at, for example, and I ask myself is, are these essential? Are they viable? And the reinvest. And so we look at from a standpoint, that's what all businesses are looking at right now. All commercial investors are saying, hey, my tenant base, can they sustain this? And we thought it would be a major shift. The storm is coming. It's pretty obvious there's going to be a number of delinquents. There's MBS debt, and so there's a big storm that we're anticipating happening. Early 2021. Just all the stimulus money is going to wear off, and so there's some concerns that we have. But then again, it's time for us to adapt as an industry and innovate and use outdoor space and be proactive about what's coming on the horizon.
Thank you, Demetre. For a minute there, you froze up a little bit, but if I was to recount what I think I heard you say was, right now things are good, but you are anticipating a storm coming in early 2021 as like bills catch up to people. And you're hearing that from people, real estate investors across the country.
Absolutely. We're anticipating a storm. And so what we're doing to be proactive is really providing technical assistance with our tenants, helping them shift their business models if it's not viable, And if they are viable businesses, even as a landlord, look at investing in with our tenants to help their businesses grow and take advantage of their opportunities to grow. So we're being very active, very creative. And I think you're going to see a lot of landlords from a national tenant standpoint down to the regional mom and pops of landlords going to be more active, whether they invest with their tenants, they provide technical support, or they start being realistic and start shifting their model as far as the footprint, the use of outdoor space, repurposing their properties, etc.
Great. Thank you. April, the Coronavirus Relief and Response Act actually helped people who were laid off. It allowed them to maybe defer their mortgage payments for a period of time. Meanwhile, Boise's market has continued to be really hot. As you mentioned before, inventory is down, prices are up. In my neighborhood, multiple people talk about how they purchased a house for cash. And so my question to you is, are you seeing a shift in customers? Is it in-state people who are buying homes, or are we continuing to see a massive trend of out-of-state buyers who are coming to Idaho for a host of different purposes?
We're seeing both. I would say if I had to give you a percentage, about 60% of our clients right now are relocating in from out of state. And it's interesting because they're all relocating for different reasons, whether it's they want to get away from having to be in their homes and confined, in the state of California, or they've got family or a connection here and grandbabies on the way. A lot of young professionals are moving to the area as well. I mean, we've got people coming in from all over, a lot coming in from Washington and Oregon and California, but even back in like Chicago, we have quite a few people moving here. So we see a lot of relocation right now. But still local buyers wanting to move up. The fear right now is with inventory being so low, people don't want to list their homes until they can secure another property. And if you're a buyer out in our market right now, you're experiencing multiple offers. Sometimes you're competing against 8 to 10 different buyers for one property. A lot of cash buyers in our marketplace, making it more difficult for people getting a loan to compete with an all cash offer.
So the larger question that I would like to follow up on is, are we maintaining pace with new construction? And where are we at on new construction, and largely what kind of new construction is going into place, and what are you selling?
I would say we're not maintaining our pace with new construction. We entered, a year ago, we had a shortage of building lots. And now with the decrease in inventory, the developers just can't develop the buildable lots fast enough. There are builders in our valley, some of the larger builders building 100 or selling 100 homes a month right now. And a lot of these sales are on properties that aren't even recorded yet, but we have buyers waiting for them to record and to build. Inventory is so low. If you're a first-time home buyer looking for a new construction home, your average price is going to be about $300,000, and there's nothing out there. So you're going to have to wait 6 to 8 months for it to be completed. So really high demand. It would be great for some of our developers and some of our cities to approve more higher density housing, hopefully to bring some of the costs down for smaller, say, townhomes or condos in our area, just to allow those first-time home buyers to get into the marketplace.
Yeah, that's huge. And I've got a question for you about startups, but I'll hold it for startup homes and starter homes, but I'll hold it for just a second. Clark, one of the things that I value about the Boise Valley Economic Partnership is how, on the whole, your organization looks at the entire gestalt value of the community. So not just bringing businesses here, but the things that attract businesses. So education and housing markets. And 2008 it's such an interesting difference, but in 2008, the housing market completely plummeted. And right now we have, higher unemployment than it was certainly in February, but our market is still going strong. Can you kind of dissect why you think that's the case and why the housing market hasn't reacted to unemployment levels?
Well, as April well knows, we were second fastest growing metro in the country, and I'll bet you we still are. And so we have a lot of in-migration happening. We have a lot of people, this community is growing, people from in-state moving into Boise Metro or new people coming in. We have one of the highest immigration statistics in the country. So that has continued. I think the difference, I got here in 2010 in September, 10 years ago. And I remember the governor of New Mexico, I worked for at the time, sent me this article. It was a headline in USA Today. It talked about subprime loans and how it was just crushing certain cities. And of course, they featured Boise right before I was moving there the next week. We don't have those kind of problems anymore. I think, people are building smart and banks aren't allowed to, or people aren't able to get speculative loans. And so we're never going to have that problem again, I don't think, to where we're overbuilding and there's a lot of speculation out there. We also have the lowest interest rates ever right now in the country. And so I think that is prompting people who've been waiting and deciding to move. April talked about access to recreation. Demetre talked about that. I think that's a huge component for us, is that as people are stuck in their homes all day, they're realizing I got to get out of this metro and find a place where I can get on a trail or I can have, the quality of life that I'm looking for. Also, I think this remote thing is going to be really interesting to watch. People have the choice to work remotely now. And so I think you're going to see even more people that are going to look at Boise and say, this is a place I want to be because I can work remotely now. So I get to live wherever I want. And I don't think that's going to slow anything down when you talk about this economy. And I also think that we're more diverse than we were 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And so we have more jobs in more different industries. And we're retaining our college kids now. Kids that are coming out of Boise State want to stay here. And so they're finding a way to do that. And then, of course, their parents want to move here about a year later. So, I look at it, we're not going to slow down. We're going to have this for a long time. Hopefully our builders can keep up.
There have been conversations around there actually being some supply line disruptions as a result of COVID, which may be impacting new construction. But Scott, year over year, I know you're a numbers guy and that this is kind of like where you're at, but can you tell us year over year where Colliers is at and where you're at in terms of leasing?
Let me take myself off mute. So I'll just kind of read you some numbers from where I compared January to June of 2019 and January of June to 2020. So last year versus, shutdown, COVID. We did 59 leases as a company in 2019 from January to June. And then this year we've done 33, so roughly half. And then on the sales side, from January to June in 2019, you'll see that it's fairly similar. We did about $54 million in office sales. And then in 2019, and then from January to June of 2020, we did roughly 49 million. So 54 million 2019, 49 million 2020, and roughly. But the number of transactions in 2020 were about half of the same time period. So larger values. So that's what we're seeing. So there has been a slowdown in transactions.
So is Colliers putting in some contingency plans moving in, kind of like Demetre was talking about with regard to the next 8 to 10 months, or do you feel like it's going to continue at this rate, or do you think we're going to see an increased slowdown?
I don't have the crystal ball for that. I think what a lot of April and Clark were alluding to is this in-migration is going to hopefully prop up our business. I went to our Phoenix office a few years ago, and the head office of Colliers in Phoenix said people always ask us what made Phoenix what is, what's our driving factor, and this guy, simple answer is growth. There's no simple way to put it. There's no specific industry. Growth made Phoenix. And so, there are good pros and cons to growth. In my industry, that would be is a great thing, but does that limit our access, and does it create traffic and things like that? It's another problem. But I think growth is gonna keep this thing afloat.
Well, and the pluses of growth is just more opportunity in the Treasure Valley, regardless of where we're expanding. And speaking of growth, Demetre, you just purchased the Gown and Bridal Center that's located on Ustick. And I know I'm talking about a specific piece of property, but you're talking about a part of the West Bench that is largely residential, has decreased walk access to restaurants and other services, or very limited for that matter. What do you see the best use of this space, and what are your plans for it?
That's a loaded question. So number one, we bought that property because it reminds me of a neighborhood in San Diego called North Park, where 10 years ago, no one wanted to live in North Park. Now it's one of the more vibrant, walkable areas of all of San Diego. So we saw a similar vision when we bought the property. So obviously the Ustick Town Center are known as a formal bridal center. Everyone in Boise, or most people who's lived in Boise for a number of years, know that site. The parking lot was bad, the facade, etc. And so we're going through all the plans to activate the space. We're working with local artists to do a mural of the West Bench, so we could bring some history to the area and really activate it and really bring the hipster scene or art scene to the table. That usually launches a neighborhood. So the highest and best use for that site could go two different ways. Pre-COVID, we were looking at activating the space with art, bring in outdoor activities. For example, once we finish the parking lot, having movie nights, having food truck. So we're doing all the electrical build out to have food truck stations and whatnot to go along with improving the facade, adding patio, outdoor space, drive-through, etc. So we wanted to activate it to where it could become walkable. We were trying to recruit a brewery, two different breweries back to the area. So the whole goal is there's pretty solid incomes in that area, and we want that income to spend their money in the neighborhood and be able to walk and eat and go there for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Post-COVID, we started to reevaluate our plans, and it's still one of our, it's Plan 1A. Plan 1B is also looking at and saying what's going to be the best use for the neighborhood. The other option is to redevelop the site into multifamily. I have a strong background in affordable housing. I work closely with some of the largest affordable housing developers in California, particularly San Diego. So we explored possibly, which doesn't happen often in Boise, to convert the property to 100% affordable housing, 50 to 60% AMI. And most properties have a very limited number of affordable housing. So we're exploring two different options. If we redevelop it to affordable housing, we're looking at acquiring the adjacent parcels to then activate those retail spaces. So ultimately, we're looking at a couple options. Plan 1A, activate it, bring in a coffee shop. We got chip cookies coming in. We're looking at Poppy Seed Bakery coming in as a drive-through concept to create something that people know. And then option 1B is to redevelop it as housing with the goal of acquiring the nearby retail and still activating with murals and everything else for the neighborhood.
That's cool. I need you to keep the dog wash place though, because I go there all the time and it's pretty important. But truthfully, I'm lucky. I live in a neighborhood that's really highly walkable, and some of the vision you're talking about could be so transformative for that community to be able to do that. And so, April, as we start to see more and more neighborhoods converted into high walkability, high livability communities, the top of mind for Boise residents right now is property taxes and being able to get into affordable housing. So young professionals that are here and can't get into a neighborhood because they simply, for example, don't have a cash offer and need to work through a loan. What are you seeing and what needs to happen to really ensure that there are those starter homes for people in our communities? And what are the trends that you're seeing as Boise just continues to explode with growth?
Well, I want to make something clear first is I don't want anyone to think that if you're getting a loan, you can't compete in a multiple offer situation. We've had a lot of success.
I did not mean to imply that.
Yeah, we've had a lot of success in helping buyers draft letters and explanations. I mean, there's strategic ways you can compete against all cash offers, and we've been successful in that. So what we're starting to see is just higher density projects, more townhome, more condos coming into our marketplace, bringing, some of the average price ranges down, depending on the location. I wish I could tell you that we're seeing property taxes drop. That's not the case whatsoever. That's constantly on the forefront of local residents who've been here for 20 and 30 years. I mean, you have the opportunity for the exemption, the homeowner's exemption, and then there's a circuit breaker exemption, but I don't know of any plans personally right now for capping our property taxes in the area. Builders are doing everything they can to, buy up the land in whether it's the Meridian area or the Eagle area or even out in Nampa or Caldwell. And there's a lot of upcoming projects. I want to say there's about 10,000 lots in the pipeline right now that will hopefully offset. It's just about an 18-month process to get those developments through the approval process and then get the improvements underground to make it a permittable lot. So we've got more land, more buildable lots coming. It's just not here in time, I would say.
Yeah, I apologize if I made it sound like that you couldn't. I didn't mean that. I wanted to. There's these other challenges that are associated with it, and that is from a property tax perspective. I spent 7 years on the House Revenue and Taxation Committee. Cities and counties right now have frozen their budgets, so there's no increase there. But there is this challenge of, as our market continues to be hot and the assessed value of residential property goes up, while commercial remains constant and or flat, people will continue to see property tax increases as long as the system is designed the way it is, regardless of budgets and regardless of what is happening. So it's a big legislative issue. Clark, getting away from taxes, because I know that's a hot topic. When there wasn't a pandemic, you spoke about the talent pipeline a lot. And a lot of the companies that are involved in the Boise Valley Economic Partnership have talked about how difficult it is to actually recruit and retain people in Boise to meet their employment needs. Have you heard any changes there? Are there changes within the employment pipeline? And what are we looking at for the future regardless of a pandemic?
Yeah, thank you for the question. First of all, I think Demetre's daughter should be featured on this chat, but I would say that our college retention rate has gone through the roof, and so the talent that is being graduated here is staying here, and I think that's been a huge change in the last few years. It really makes things a lot easier for us to prove to companies that there is talent that is being grown here. Companies, when they're looking, they're as interested about what's going to happen in 5, 10, 15 years out in the pipeline, and we're doing a good job with that. Retention rates with the college students, as well as our corporations, are telling us that people that work for them are more likely to stay with them longer here than at their other facilities. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The other thing is, what is the remote worker going to do for us? We talked to Doree Westover, who's with one of she's a talent recruiter, and she's saying that, companies here are now being able to offer jobs to people that are still living in, let's say, Los Angeles or San Francisco or Seattle, and say, hey, you can move when it becomes available. Because of the remote working situation, we think this will actually help Boise, because we know once they visit here, they're going to move here, but they're able to start hiring people outside of the area and wait and move them when that becomes available again. And so we think that's a huge thing. Having a community college here, 10 years, we didn't really, 12 years ago, we didn't have a community college in Boise. And to have that and be able to get those skills up quickly that we need in the marketplace has changed things dramatically in Boise. All of those things, looking at that pipeline of talent 5, 10, 15 years out, the Boise story is much better than it's ever been, along with that in-migration of talent that's coming in that has not slowed down. And as much as you'll hear it's all retired people moving here, it's not. statistically, we have more younger families and people within the work population from 20 to 55 moving, or 20 to 60, than most communities across the country. So is it hard to find talent? It's hard to find talent all across the country if you're looking for specialized skill sets. Is it easy to recruit to Boise? I think it's becoming more and more easy, and especially with what's happened recently, access to recreation and quality of life are greater here than I can't even imagine another city that could keep up with us. So I think, for the long term, we're in good shape.
We could continue this conversation for hours, but we're at 45 minutes, and I like to keep this as focused as possible. First, I want to thank all four of you for joining us today. April, thank you so much for bringing your residential expertise. Scott, thank you for bringing the broker's perspective and the leasing agent. And Demetre, welcome to Boise. We're so glad to have you making big investments in properties here and looking at walkability and some of the redevelopment. And Clark, continue to bring those businesses here and continue to advocate for our value, because that's what keeps people here. On behalf of the Boise Metro Chamber, I just would like to thank our sponsors again. Executive Management Services has been great. Alliance, Title, Stark Accelerators, Commercial Development, and of course, Hendricks Commercial Development. All four of you, we're so thankful that you're willing to invest in our organization so that we can put out quality content. And to those of you that spent your hour watching this conversation, thank you so much for believing and for engaging. And we will see you all next time. Thank you so much.
See ya.
Thank you.